began with an envelope, cream-colored, heavy, and perfumed with familiarity. Ethan Whitaker turned it over in his hands, his thumb tracing the embossed letters as if they might burn. Vivian Cross, his ex-fiancée, the woman who had once promised forever and then walked away the moment his empire trembled. Now she was getting married, and she wanted him to know. He unfolded the invitation, scanning the elegant script. "You are cordially invited," he let out a dry laugh. "Cordially, how polite of her." The words tasted bitter. He dropped the card onto his glass table, its reflection fractured by the city lights pouring through the window. From across the room, a voice cut through the silence. "You look like you're about to set that thing on fire." Ethan glanced up. His longtime friend and business advisor, Noah Park, leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 cups of black coffee. Ethan gestured toward the envelope. "She sent me an invitation, as if I'd actually go." Noah arched an eyebrow. "Vivian Cross, the same woman who dumped you right before the Avalon merger fell apart?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Timing was her specialty. Noah sat down opposite him, sliding a cup across the table. "So, are you going?" Ethan scoffed. "And show up alone, just to prove her right? That I'm still the man who lost everything she wanted?" Noah leaned forward. "Then don't go alone." Ethan looked up, half amused, half irritated. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Bring someone," Noah said simply. "Someone who will make her wonder if she miscalculated." Ethan huffed a laugh, but the idea lingered. Not revenge, not really. Something sharper, a reminder that he didn't crumble when she left. "Who would I even take?" he muttered. "Anyone who won't make you look desperate," Noah replied. "Someone who makes people ask questions." Ethan stared out at the Boston skyline. Questions. He could already picture Vivian's perfect smile faltering, even for a second. Later that evening, rain slicked the sidewalks of Back Bay. The city shimmered under the blur of headlights and neon. Ethan walked aimlessly, hands buried in the pockets of his wool coat, the invitation still folded inside. He passed a small 24-hour diner, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and nostalgia. And that's when he saw her. A young woman sat on the curb just beyond the restaurant's awning. Her jeans were torn, her coat too thin for the cold, but her back was straight. Rain darkened her hair, and yet she didn't flinch from it. People passed her without looking. Ethan would have too, if not for her eyes. They weren't pleading, they were assessing. He hesitated, then approached. "You shouldn't be sitting out here." She didn't look up. "And you shouldn't talk to strangers on the street." Her voice was clear, steady, not what he expected. Ethan smiled faintly. "Do you need money?" That made her look at him, sharp, almost amused. "What is this? A social experiment? You ask, I answer, then you toss me $1 to feel generous?" Ethan blinked. No one had ever spoken to him like that. "That's not what I meant." She tilted her head, eyes glinting under the rain. "Of course it isn't." He studied her, intrigued despite himself. "What's your name?" "Depends who's asking," she said flatly. He laughed once under his breath. "Ethan Whitaker." Her brow furrowed slightly, as if the name meant something, but she masked it quickly. "Good for you." Ethan took a step closer. "I have an offer, 1 night of your time. You come with me to an event, and I'll pay you enough to—" She cut in before he could finish. "Change my life?" She smirked. "Do you always sound like a man auditioning for a savior role?" Ethan exhaled through a faint smile. "I just need someone to accompany me to a wedding, that's all." She arched an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "As serious as it gets." She looked him over. The tailored coat, the watch, the measured confidence. Then she gave a small laugh, low and amused. "So, let me guess. You want me to be your trophy date, to make someone jealous?" He didn't answer. She stood, brushing rain from her sleeves. "You don't even deny it. I'm offering you a choice," Ethan said calmly. "Say no and I'll walk away. Say yes and you get a night out. Maybe a new start." The woman considered him for a long moment. The city noise faded. Just the hum of passing taxis, the rain against glass. Then she smiled, slow and dangerous. "I'll accept." Ethan blinked. "Just like that?" "I'm curious," she said, stepping closer. "Curious about what?" Her voice softened, but her gaze didn't. "To see how far a man like you is willing to go to prove something." Ethan stared at her, trying to read what game she was playing. "What's your name?" he asked again. She gave a faint smile. Mara Vale." She turned toward the streetlight, rain catching the curve of her jaw. In that fleeting glow, she didn't look like someone broken. She looked like someone watching a chessboard, only she could see. He gestured to the black car waiting nearby. "I'll have a driver pick you up tomorrow at noon. Wear something formal." Mara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Formal, right." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "You're not even going to ask if I'll keep your secret?" He looked back, caught off guard. "What secret?" "The one you're trying to hide behind that wedding invitation." Ethan froze. Her voice was too calm, too knowing. "How do you know about that?" he asked slowly. She shrugged. "Lucky guess. Or maybe it's written all over your face." She gave a small salute and walked toward the diner door, her reflection flickering in the wet pavement. Ethan stood there, speechless, watching her vanish into the glow of the neon sign. Inside the car, he pulled the envelope from his coat pocket again. The paper was slightly damp now, the ink bleeding, just enough to blur the name Vivian Cross. He ran his fingers over the letters until they faded under his touch. Then he reached for his pen, an old fountain pen with a silver clip, worn smooth from years of use. But as he slipped it back into his pocket, something tugged at his memory. A flicker, a look. Before walking away, Mara had glanced at that very pen, not with curiosity, with recognition, as if she'd seen it before. Ethan leaned back against the seat, eyes narrowing. Who exactly had he just invited into his world? And more importantly, why did it feel like she already knew him? The next morning, the city of Boston wore a pale, forgiving light, the kind that made even old brick buildings look gentle. Ethan's car glided quietly up Beacon Hill, stopping in front of Maison Aurière, one of the city's most exclusive salons. Inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered above marble floors, and the faint scent of lavender oil floated through the air. Ethan pushed the door open, the sound of soft jazz following him in. Mara stood at the entrance, her hands tucked inside the sleeves of an oversized coat. Her hair was damp, her jeans faded, but her posture carried something oddly regal. "Ready?" he asked. She tilted her head, studying the ornate mirrors and the line of stylists already whispering to each other. "Depends," she said coolly. "Ready for what, exactly?" "To become unrecognizable," he said. Mara smirked. "That shouldn't be hard. People rarely recognize what they refuse to see." Ethan raised a brow but didn't respond. Instead, he gestured toward the head stylist, a sharp-eyed woman in black silk. "Everything. Hair, makeup, wardrobe. I want a complete transformation." The woman nodded briskly. "Of course, Mr. Whitaker." Within seconds, assistants moved around Mara like a coordinated storm, measuring, photographing, debating palettes and cuts. But Mara didn't seem overwhelmed. She watched them with a detached amusement, as though she'd seen it all before. When one assistant held up a rack of couture dresses, Mara stepped closer, brushing her fingers across the fabric. "That's Maison Renard," she murmured. "Fall collection, 4 seasons ago. It'll photograph well, but wrinkle under spotlight heat." The stylist froze. "You follow fashion?" Mara gave a half smile. "You'd be surprised what people on the street notice through store windows." She walked to another rack and pulled a deep emerald gown. Minimal lines, understated elegance. "This one," she said. "And I'll need the seamstress who did the alterations for the governor's gala last year. She works faster than your in-house team." The room went silent. The stylist blinked. "How would you possibly know that?" Mara turned to face her, eyes calm. "Because I was there." For a second, the only sound was the hum of the blow-dryers. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with new curiosity. As Mara sat down in the styling chair, one of the assistants reached to untie the frayed red scarf from her wrist. "We'll remove this, miss, to avoid staining." "Don't," said another voice, soft but firm. Everyone turned. The salon's owner, Madame Aurière herself, had appeared from the back office, elegant, silver-haired, draped in pearls. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with recognition. "That scarf," she murmured. "It's one of ours." Mara looked up, startled. "Yours?" "Yes," Madame said, touching the edge of the silk. "Limited. Edition. Charity auction. 5 years ago. Only 20 were made. I remember because one was bought by a young woman who said she'd wear it as a reminder that compassion is still a kind of luxury." The air shifted. Ethan's gaze flicked toward Mara, but her expression remained composed. Only her fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. Madame smiled faintly. It's rare to see one again. It suits you. Maybe because it used to, Mara said quietly. The older woman studied her for a long moment, then gave a graceful nod and turned away. The moment she left, Ethan stepped closer. So, he said, lowering his voice, you've been to charity auctions, governor's galas. Should I assume you were a guest, not staff? Mara's lips curved. You can assume whatever you like. He leaned in slightly. I'd rather know. She met his gaze in the mirror. And ruin the mystery already? That would be boring. For the next 2 hours, the salon worked like a hive. The sound of scissors snipping blended with the low rhythm of jazz. Mara's dark hair fell in soft waves that framed her face. Her nails were polished to a quiet pearl sheen. The makeup artist whispered over contour lines and undertones, but Mara seemed to need no guidance. She simply lifted her chin, as if she knew exactly how the light should fall. Every so often, Ethan found himself staring, not at the transformation, but at how natural it looked on her. When the stylist finally stepped back, Mara rose slowly, facing the full-length mirror. She didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She simply regarded herself, the reflection of someone who seemed carved from her own history. Ethan broke the silence. You don't look surprised. Mara's eyes met his in the mirror. Because I'm not. He frowned. Most people would be. Most people, she said, haven't seen themselves disappear before. That sentence hung between them like fog. Ethan took a step closer. You talk like someone who's lived 3 lives already. Maybe I have. She glanced at him sideways. Don't worry, Mr. Whitaker. You're not my first project. He gave a short laugh. I didn't realize I was one. Everyone is, she said softly, in someone else's story. As she turned away from the mirror, the stylist rushed forward with a pair of satin gloves, pale ivory, delicate as moonlight. For the finishing touch, Mara slipped them on, flexing her fingers. Perfect fit, she murmured. The stylist smiled nervously. How did you know? Mara looked down at the gloves, then up at her reflection again. Because they were made for women who pretend they've never worked a day in their lives. Ethan couldn't help but smile. You're full of observations, aren't you? It's a habit. When you stop talking, you start noticing. He studied her carefully. You said last night you wanted to see how far I'd go. Maybe I should ask the same about you. She met his gaze, her tone cool. I'm not the one playing a game, Mr. Whitaker. Then what are you doing? She picked up a small silver clutch from the counter, turning it over in her hands. Taking an opportunity when it walks into the rain and offers me one. He stepped in front of her, lowering his voice. You don't strike me as someone who needs rescuing. Her smile deepened, half sadness, half challenge. Good, because I don't. For a heartbeat, their eyes held, the charged silence of 2 people who recognized danger but refused to step back from it. Finally, Ethan looked away. We leave in an hour. The car will be waiting. Mara nodded, slipping her red scarf back around her wrist. Then I'll be ready. She glanced at the mirror one last time. The woman staring back at her wasn't the one who had sat on a wet curb the night before. She looked like she belonged here, among glass and light and murmured luxury. But in her eyes, something else flickered, a shadow that no reflection could erase. When Ethan turned to pay, Madame Aurier called after him gently. Mr. Whitaker, he paused. The older woman's gaze shifted to Mara, then back to him. Be careful what you try to polish. Some things were already gold. Ethan gave a polite nod but said nothing. Outside, as they stepped into the sunlight, he watched Mara adjust the red scarf again, her fingers brushing the worn silk with an affection he didn't understand. He couldn't shake the thought that somewhere beneath the transformation, he hadn't changed her at all. He'd only uncovered someone who had once worn that world like a second skin. And as the car door closed behind her, he caught the faintest reflection of her face in the glass, composed, unreadable, and hauntingly familiar. He turned to the driver. Beacon Grand Hotel, and make it quick. The driver nodded. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding past the polished windows of Beacon Hill, where reflections flickered, some real, some imagined, but all whispering the same question Ethan couldn't silence. Who exactly is Mara Vale? By sunset, the clouds over Boston had cleared to reveal a ribbon of gold stretching along the Charles River. The Riverside Grand Hotel, an old Beaux-Arts monument of marble and chandeliers, glittered like a jewel polished for this single night. Luxury cars glided up to its entrance, spilling out the city's elite, Senators, heiresses, the glossy editors who decided what elegance meant. Photographers called names like confetti. When the black sedan bearing Whittaker plates arrived, the noise changed pitch. Ethan stepped out first, tall, immaculate, composed as always. But when Mara followed, time seemed to pause. The flash of cameras stuttered, then multiplied. The red carpet lights caught the emerald sheen of her gown. The silk clung like water, falling in perfect simplicity. Her hair shimmered beneath the golden chandeliers above the entryway. For a second, even the photographers forgot Ethan's name. Every lens tilted toward her. Inside the hotel lobby, whispers chased them like perfume. Who is she? Not from the guest list? Look at that poise. A model? A diplomat? Mara heard them all, yet her smile never faltered. She moved with quiet certainty, as if she'd memorized every marble step years ago. Ethan leaned toward her. You're stealing the attention. That was the point, wasn't it? She murmured. You wanted her to notice. He caught the glint in her eyes. Not arrogance, something keener. Calculation. As the maitre d' opened the grand ballroom doors, a symphony of crystal, laughter, and soft piano spilled out. Gilded ceilings mirrored hundreds of candles. Waiters glided like clockwork, bearing champagne that sparkled like sunlight caught in glass. And at the far end, under a floral arch of white lilies and ivory roses, stood Vivian Cross. Her dress, ivory silk, sleeveless, precision itself, made her look carved rather than alive. Beside her, Charles Montrose radiated the polished ease of old money, composed, correct, forgettable. Vivian turned, laughing at something Charles whispered, until her gaze found Ethan across the room. Her laughter died mid-note. Ethan met her eyes, his expression unreadable. He didn't flinch, but beside him, Mara's hand rested lightly on his arm, steadying him like a silent metronome. As they approached, the murmurs swelled. Vivian straightened, mask slipping into place. Ethan, she said smoothly, her voice a practiced melody, I didn't expect you to come. Of course you didn't, he replied. I thought I'd return the favor, show up unannounced. Her gaze flicked to Mara, and the smile trembled. And this is... Before Ethan could speak, Mara extended her hand, graceful, confident. Mara Vale, she said, a pleasure. The handshake was perfect, poised, deliberate, yet not submissive. Vivian's fingers tightened around hers. Vale, she repeated softly, as though testing the weight of the word. Charles, standing, slightly behind, looked up at the name. His jaw stiffened, a flash of something behind his courteous mask, but he quickly forced a smile. Miss Vale, he said, you look familiar. Have we met? Mara's eyes glimmered. I doubt it, Mr. Montrose. I would have remembered. Vivian's painted smile thinned. How lovely to meet. Ethan's companion. Mara tilted her head, all politeness. Companion. That's one word for it. I prefer co-conspirator, but he hates that term. Vivian's laugh came a fraction too late. Charming. Ethan cleared his throat. Congratulations, Vivian. You've outdone yourself. Thank you, she said, tone sharp. It's not every day one marries a man who truly deserves them. Mara's voice slid in, silk over steel. Oh, I know that feeling. Vivian turned, eyebrows rising. Do you? Yes, Mara replied lightly, lifting her champagne glass. I was once engaged myself, but apparently I wasn't quite the right fit for the family. The silence was instant. Even the pianist stumbled over a note. Ethan's grip on his glass tightened. Vivian's eyes flashed, and Charles shifted uneasily beside her. What an uncanny coincidence, Vivian said finally, each word crisp. Mara's smile deepened just enough. Life has a talent for irony. She sipped her drink, eyes locked with Vivian's, and for the briefest moment, victory glimmered like firelight between them. Then Mara turned to Ethan. Shall we dance? Vivian's voice faltered. The orchestra hasn't... But Ethan was already offering his hand. Let's. They moved to the center of the floor, as the band slipped into a slow, haunting melody, a tango, unexpected at a wedding. Mara faced him squarely, her palm against his chest, her posture commanding. Relax, she said under her breath. It's just a dance. You're leading, he muttered, only because you were thinking too much. The crowd circled, watching. The contrast was electric. Ethan's contained fur against Mara's fluid confidence. Her steps cut through the polished floor with precision, the train of her gown brushing the edge of his shoes. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" he whispered. She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what lingers from a past life." He tried to regain control, shifting the rhythm, but she countered seamlessly, guiding him through turns that drew eyes from every table. The chandelier light fractured across her earrings, scattering flecks of gold across his face. At one point, she spun beneath his arm and came back close enough that her breath warmed his collar. "I told you," she murmured. "People will be watching for her reaction." Ethan glanced past her shoulder. Vivian stood near the dais, smiling too widely, clutching her glass hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "Mission accomplished," he said. Mara's lips curved. "Not yet." She shifted the tempo. A sudden dip, a turn, her hand trailing down his sleeve as the orchestra swelled. Ethan caught her by the waist, startled but captivated. For a heartbeat, the rest of the room vanished. When the music slowed, applause rippled through the guests. Mara's gaze met his, unreadable, faintly amused. "Not bad for a rehearsal," she said softly. He exhaled a laugh. "Rehearsal for what?" "For whatever you think you're doing," she replied. "The performance always matters more than the motive." He studied her, the deliberate calm, the hints of fire beneath her composure. "You keep turning everything into theater." "Maybe because everyone here wears costumes," she said, glancing toward Vivian. "I just know how to play my part." As they left the dance floor, a ripple of whispers followed. Men looked at her with admiration, women with suspicion. Mara walked as though she'd choreographed every stare, every flash of envy. Ethan leaned closer. "You do realize half this room wants to know who you are now?" "Good," she said without looking at him. "Let them wonder." At their table, a waiter appeared with fresh champagne. As he poured, Charles approached, his polite smile struggling against unease. "That was quite a performance," he said. "You move as if you've done this 100 times. Mara looked up, her tone light. "Dancing or surviving?" He hesitated. "Both, I suppose." "Then yes," she said. 100 times, maybe more." For a fleeting moment, something like recognition flickered in Charles's eyes, and guilt, quickly buried. Vivian appeared beside him, reclaiming his arm. Her voice was honeyed, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Enjoy the evening, Miss Vale," she said. "I'm sure it will be memorable." Mara raised her glass. "It already is." As the couple moved away, Ethan turned to her. "What was that about?" She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "Just an introduction." "To what?" "To the part where they start asking questions." She looked across the ballroom, at Vivian's perfect composure cracking at the edges, at Charles whispering something urgent, and the smallest hint of satisfaction curved her lips. Under the chandeliers, amid the music and murmurs, Mara Vale had entered their world not as a guest, but as a storm. And Ethan realized, watching her smile into her glass, that he might have invited not an ally, but a force he could no longer control. The ballroom had shifted moods. The music softened to a hum of strings. The dance floor became a stage of quiet alliances and veiled negotiations. Waiters moved between clusters of tailored suits and sequined gowns, serving champagne to conversations that weighed billions. Ethan had left Mara for a few minutes to greet old investors, but when he turned back, she was surrounded. A small circle of venture capitalists, all men in their 50s, leaned in toward her, their posture the same mix of curiosity and caution reserved for newcomers who didn't seem to need approval. Mara stood at the center of it all, calm, poised, the faintest smile on her lips. "So, tell us, Miss Vale," one of them said, swirling his glass. "You seem to have strong opinions about tech investment. You think artificial intelligence is overvalued?" Mara took a slow sip of champagne before replying. "Not overvalued," she said, "just misunderstood." That caught their attention. She continued, her voice measured but firm. AI in healthcare, for example. Everyone's rushing to automate diagnosis, but few talk about what happens when the algorithm starts predicting things it shouldn't. Like, who deserves treatment more based on profitability? A murmur ran through the group. "That's not a problem for investors," another man said. "It's exactly a problem for investors," Mara countered, her tone steady. "Because one scandal, one lawsuit, one misused data set, and your billion-dollar company becomes a headline about exploitation. Ethical failure isn't just moral, it's financial." The men exchanged looks. One nodded reluctantly. "You make it sound like risk and conscience are the same currency." They always have been, Mara said. Only now, the market's starting to notice. Ethan watched from across the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had seen people charm investors before, but this was different. Mara wasn't performing. She was dissecting the game in front of its players, and they were thanking her for it. Just then, a smooth baritone voice slipped into the conversation. Très intéressant. The men turned as Adrien Moreau approached. Tall, elegant, his French accent smooth as velvet. His tuxedo looked sculpted rather than stitched, and his cologne carried an unmistakable signature, one that announced money without saying a word. Miss Vale, he said, offering his hand. Adrien Moreau. I couldn't help overhearing your thoughts on ethical data. They remind me of a panel I attended in Geneva. Mara shook his hand lightly. Then I suppose Geneva's finally catching up. The circle laughed, polite, impressed. Adrienne smiled. You have a sharp mind, mademoiselle. Tell me, what's your view on infrastructure investment? I'm currently forming a fund to address coastal adaptation, climate risk along the Atlantic. Coastal adaptation? She repeated thoughtfully. A noble cause, if it isn't just another tax shelter. His brows lifted in amusement. You don't waste time, do you? I prefer clarity, she said. You're talking about resilience bonds, correct? Public-private partnerships for seawalls and sustainable harbors? He nodded, intrigued. Exactly. I see you're familiar with the model. I'm familiar with its failures, she replied. Most of those projects collapse under inflated valuations before they even reach construction. Unless you have transparent funding and a board that values impact over image, you're building castles on sinking sand. Adrian tilted his head, clearly entertained. And what would you build, if not castles? Harbors, she said softly. Real ones. For people who can't afford to drown. The silence that followed was almost reverent. Charles Montrose, standing nearby with a cluster of donors, had been half listening. At Mara's words, his head turned, his eyes narrowed slightly. Ethan noticed the shift. So did Vivian. Charles stepped closer to one of his associates, a tall man with a silver beard, and whispered, Did she say Vale? Yes, the man murmured. Mara Vale. Charles frowned. Vale, as in Raphael Vale. The older man nodded slowly. The same. The one whose construction firm went under after that incident. Charles's gaze darted toward Mara, then to Vivian, whose expression had hardened into porcelain calm. Impossible, she said under her breath. He had no family left. Charles didn't answer. His knuckles tightened around the stem of his glass. Across the room, Mara felt the weight of the glances converging. Her instincts sharpened. She turned slightly, her smile never faltering, but her pulse quickened beneath the satin gloves. Ethan reappeared at her side. Enjoying yourself? She glanced up at him, voice smooth. Immensely. You throw a very educational party. He leaned closer. I think you've made half the city's financiers fall in love with you. That wasn't the assignment, she said lightly. No, he replied, but it's working. Before she could answer, a waiter passed with a tray of drinks. Ethan took 2 glasses and offered her one, his eyes sharp now. Who taught you to talk like that? Like what? Like someone who spent a lifetime closing billion-dollar deals. She raised her glass. Observation and a good memory. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're a mystery, Mara Vale, and you don't like mysteries, she said, not when they have last names that make people whisper. Her eyes flicked toward him, steady and unflinching. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking. Then ask clearly. Ethan set his glass down. Who are you, really? The words were quiet but heavy, the kind of question that doesn't need volume to wound. Mara turned her gaze toward the ballroom's or window, where the river lights shimmered beyond the glass. Her reflection looked calm, but her hands tightened around the glass stem. Does it matter? She said finally. It does, he said. To me. She looked back at him, the faintest trace of sorrow crossing her eyes. Then maybe that's your mistake. He exhaled, frustrated. You're hiding something. I can feel it. Maybe you're just not used to people who don't explain themselves, she replied softly. You've lived too long in a world that confuses transparency with trust. Ethan's jaw tightened. That sounds rehearsed. Mara smiled faintly. Everything worth saying is. For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, laughter and music continued. a glittering backdrop for the quiet fracture that opening between them. Finally, Ethan took a step back. "You know," he said, his tone colder now, "for someone I found sitting on a sidewalk, you fit in here too well." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I was never the one who was out of place." He stared at her, searching for something, guilt, denial, fear, but found only that same infuriating calm. Then she placed her empty glass on a passing tray and turned toward the balcony. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Whitaker, I prefer fresh air to suspicion." He hesitated, then followed her out. The night outside was colder than it looked. The Charles River gleamed under the bridge lights, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain. Mara leaned on the railing, her breath forming pale clouds. Ethan stood beside her, silent at first. "You could just tell me," he said finally. She didn't look at him. "And end the fun so soon? I'm not playing." "Neither am I," she said quietly. "Not anymore." He turned to her. Who was Raphael Vale? Her fingers froze against the railing. The name landed like a ghost between them. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were calm again. Too calm. "Someone the world forgot," she said. "And maybe that's for the best." She pushed away from the railing and walked back toward the ballroom, the echo of her heels fading into the cold night air. Ethan watched her go, the city's glow painting her silhouette in gold and shadow, and for the first time since meeting her, he wondered not what she was hiding, but what she might be planning. By the time the orchestra played its final song, the night had already begun to unravel. Ethan stood near the exit of the Riverside Grand, nodding politely to a guest he didn't remember. His mind wasn't on the party anymore. It was on the woman who'd just walked out of the ballroom without looking back. Mara Vale. He had meant to chase her, to ask more questions, but something about her last glance had stopped him. It wasn't fear he'd seen, it was warning. Outside, rain had started again, fine and cold. Mara slipped past through the valet crowd like a shadow, her heels barely touching the pavement. She climbed into a cab, gave an address too quiet for her voice, and watched the city blur into streaks of gold and black through the wet window. Her phone buzzed once, a vibration against her palm. Unknown number, no name, no emoji, just words. He's started digging. Her pulse slowed, not sped up. She read it twice, then locked the screen. The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "Everything okay, miss?" She nodded. "Just a reminder." Back at the hotel, Ethan loosened his tie, irritation sharpening every movement. He poured himself a drink he didn't need and stared at his reflection in the dark glass of his office window. No answers, only questions, and a name that had begun to sound like a riddle. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Noah," he said when his friend picked up. "I need a favor." "That tone never means anything simple," Noah replied. "What's the name?" "Mara Vale." A short silence. "You think she's trouble?" "I think she's something, and I don't like not knowing what." "I'll run it," Noah said. "Give me an hour." Ethan ended the call, walked to his desk, and flipped open his laptop. The cursor blinked against a blank search bar. He typed the name himself. Nothing useful, no records, no history, no trace. It was like typing into fog. 1 hour later, his phone rang again. "You're not going to like this," Noah said. "There's no file, not even a birth record. The name doesn't exist in any official database for the last 10 years. Ethan frowned. "Everyone exists somewhere. Not this one," Noah said quietly. "Whoever she is, she erased herself." Ethan hung up without replying. His thoughts ran too fast to chase. Down the street, at a modest 3-star hotel tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore, Mara closed her door softly behind her. The room was small but clean, a yellow lamplight spilling over the faded carpet, and a kettle humming on the nightstand. She leaned against the door for a moment, letting the stillness soak into her. Then she walked to the desk, opened her bag, and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside was a photograph, old, creased at the corners. A man with kind eyes and weary hands stood beside a young girl no older than 10. The man's smile was patient, the sort that had learned how to endure storms. "Raphael Vale," she whispered. Her thumb brushed the edge of the photo. "It's time." From the folder beneath the photo, she drew out several pages, copies of an old company ledger. The paper was faintly yellowed, the ink fading in parts. But near the corner of one page, a signature cut through the years sharply, as if carved into the fibers. VC Mara traced the initials with her fingertip. Vivian Cross. Even after all these years, the sight of that name still felt like heat against her skin. The woman who had destroyed her father's empire had become untouchable, married into power, washed clean by reputation and wealth, until tonight. Until fate had handed Mara an invitation through Ethan Whitaker. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Same number. You're not invisible anymore. Be careful. She exhaled slowly and typed back, I was never hiding, then deleted the conversation. For a long time she sat in silence, the city's distant hum seeping through the thin walls. She could almost hear her father's voice, the way he used to tell her that truth was like concrete, strong when poured right, but deadly if it cracked. She had spent years preparing for this. Every alias, every calculated silence, every night pretending not to know names whispered in dark corners. And now, Ethan, with his arrogance, his curiosity, his connection to Vivian's world, had become both her greatest risk and her only chance. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a pen, the same one Ethan had carried in his pocket, or so it seemed. Her eyes lingered on its twin, the same brand, the same inscription engraved faintly on the clip, R.V. Raphael Vale, the last thing he'd owned before everything was taken. Mara set it beside the ledger and stared at them both until her reflection blurred in the window pane. She whispered to the empty room, You built their houses, Father. Now I'll bring their walls down. Across the river, Ethan still hadn't gone to bed. His office lights glowed like a lighthouse in the storm of the city. He opened the file Noah had sent, or rather the absence of one. No schooling, no address, no family. Just a note at the bottom. Possible alias, origin unknown. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. Who are you, Mara Vale? Then his phone lit up again. A text, this time from a blocked number. You're looking in the wrong direction. He froze. No name, no clue who sent it, but instinct told him the message was connected. To Mara, to Vivian, to something much larger than the ballroom. He typed back, Who is this? No reply. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the city. Mara turned off her lamp, lying down fully dressed. The silver locket rested on the pillow beside her, the photo facing upward. Sleep didn't come easily. It hadn't for years. But for the first time, her exhaustion wasn't from running. It was from waiting. Waiting for the moment she could finally stop pretending she didn't remember every face that had ruined her life. Downstairs, a newspaper delivery truck rumbled by, its headlights sweeping across the window. In that brief flash, the corner of the ledger glowed, and the letters VC caught the light like a secret refusing to stay buried. Mara whispered to the darkness, Tomorrow, they'll start to see me. She closed her eyes, unaware that Ethan, across the river, had whispered almost the same words, except his sounded more like a warning. The rain returned the next evening, soft but steady, drumming gently against the windows of Ethan's apartment. He had spent half the night pacing, rereading Noah's empty report on Mara Vale, and replaying every word she had said at the wedding. By morning, he gave up pretending to focus on work. The questions had become too loud to ignore. He grabbed his coat and drove through the narrow streets toward the hotel where she was staying. The receptionist recognized him instantly. People always did. But when she offered to call up to Mara's room, he shook his head. I'll find her myself, he said. When he knocked, the door opened after only a moment. Mara stood there in a loose gray sweater, her hair unstyled, no trace of last night's elegance. Yet somehow, the lack of glamour made her seem more real, more dangerous. She didn't look surprised. Mr. Whitaker, she said softly, you don't seem like the kind of man who drops by unannounced. I'm not, he said, stepping inside, but you're not exactly who you pretended to be, are you? Her eyebrow lifted slightly. That depends on what you think I pretended. He closed the door behind him, his tone clipped. I ran your name. There's nothing. No records. It's like you don't exist. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Maybe I don't, not in the way you think. I don't like riddles, Mara. Then stop asking questions that deserve them, she replied. He exhaled, trying to steady his irritation. Why are you here? Why did you really agree to come with me to that wedding? Her eyes softened, and for the first time, something like fatigue slipped through her composure. Because, she said quietly, I needed to see someone's face. Whose face? I'm not ready to say. Ethan took a step closer. You keep talking like you owe the world a secret. You don't. You owe me the truth. She turned toward the window. Rain streaked the glass, slicing her reflection into fragments. "The truth," she murmured, "cost me everything once. I'm not sure I can afford it again." "Try me," he said. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain. Then she spoke, her voice slower now, quieter, as if she were choosing each word with care. "I grew up in a world you'd recognize," she began. "White-glove dinners, waterfront estates, people who smiled at you while waiting for you to fail. My father, Raphael Valle, ran one of the largest construction companies in the region. He built half the city's skyline and believed that if you worked hard and kept your hands clean, nothing could destroy you." She gave a hollow laugh. "He was wrong." Ethan stayed silent, watching her profile against the window. "There was a project," she continued, "a housing complex near the harbor, meant for workers displaced by the new trade zone. It was his dream. A way to build something for people who actually needed it." Her hand tightened on the window frame. "But someone forged a guarantee, a legal document, a fake insurance bond that tied his name to money he never touched. When the fraud came to light, the government pulled funding, investors fled. The media crucified him before he even knew what had happened." Ethan frowned. "A forged guarantee? Someone inside the deal?" "Yes," she said. "Someone he trusted. Someone I trusted." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, then steadied again. "My mother's health collapsed under the stress. My father spent months trying to prove his innocence, but the system moves slower than a scandal. He died before the case was cleared." A quiet pause filled the room. Ethan didn't know what to say, and that silence felt heavier than any question. Finally, he asked, "And you?" Mara smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I became what was left, a name without a home, a reminder of what happens when you stand in the way of people who never lose." Her gaze turned toward him then, sharp again. "You asked who I am, Ethan. The answer is simple. I was the obstacle, and they removed me." He took a slow breath. "Who's they?" "When it's time," she said, "you'll know." He studied her, frustrated by the calm certainty in her voice. "That's not enough." "It's all you get tonight," she said. He shook his head. "You're not protecting them. You're protecting yourself from something." "Maybe," she said quietly, "or maybe I'm protecting what's left of my father's name." Ethan turned away, pacing once, then stopped. "You don't have to keep running alone." "I'm not running," she said. "I'm waiting." "For what?" She hesitated. "For the world to remember what it did." The words lingered between them like a shadow neither could escape. When he finally left, she watched him go without moving, her face unreadable. Only when the door clicked shut did she reach for the silver locket on her nightstand. Inside, the photograph stared back, her father's patient eyes, her own childlike smile. "I told the truth, Papa," she whispered. "At least part of it." Across town, Ethan sat in his parked car, rain pattering against the windshield. He replayed every word in his mind, but none of it fit together. The story was too polished, too clean, and yet the grief in her voice had been too real to fake. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. A message from Noah. "Found something. Call me." Ethan hit the dial immediately. "Tell me you have something," he said. "I do," Noah replied, his tone low. "Remember that ledger you asked me to trace, the one you saw in her room?" "Yes." "There's a signature in the corner. 2 initials. VC. Ethan's chest tightened. "Vivian Cross." "Exactly," Noah said. "But there's more. The legal witness on that fake guarantee your father, her father, supposedly signed? Charles Montrose." Ethan's blood went cold. "Charles?" "Looks that way," Noah continued. "Vivian's fiancé was the one who certified the bond. He worked for a firm handling high-value contracts back then. It all connects." Ethan leaned back in the seat, staring through the rain-streaked glass. "So, the wedding wasn't just a coincidence," Noah finished. "You walked right into the same circle that destroyed her family." For a long time, Ethan didn't speak. His reflection in the windshield looked like someone he barely recognized, a man caught between anger and disbelief. Finally, he whispered, "She knew. She knew the whole time." Noah hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Ethan's voice hardened. "Find out what she's planning." He ended the call and looked out at the storm. The streetlights shimmered through the rain, turning the city into a blur of silver and shadow. Somewhere in that blur, Mara Vale was preparing for something. And for the first time, Ethan wasn't sure whether she was the victim of a crime or the beginning of one. The next morning, the city woke to a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Headlines blazed across every financial site, every gossip column, every trending feed. Mara Vale returns, the fallen heiress. From rags to ballrooms, a social climber's comeback. The daughter of a collapsed empire reappears. By noon, her name sat at the top of the search bar, and below it, uglier words began to crawl up like mold. Gold digger, fake heiress, professional con woman. Thousands of identical comments appeared under every article, their phrasing too similar to be real. Mara scrolled through them, her jaw tight. Her reflection on the dark phone screen looked calm, but her pulse hammered beneath her ribs. She had expected resistance. She hadn't expected a digital war. The knock on the door came hard and fast. Ethan didn't wait for permission to enter. He crossed the threshold, eyes sharp, phone in hand. "You've seen it?" "Of course," she said. "I'm trending." He frowned. "This isn't organic. Someone's paying for the coverage. Probably the same person who leaked your name. Vivian," she said flatly. He nodded. "Or someone in her circle." Mara turned back toward the window, the morning light slicing across her face like glass. "It's efficient. They didn't even need to lie. They just had to remind people what they already wanted to believe." Ethan stepped closer. "You're not fighting this alone." She turned, meeting his eyes. "Don't say that. I mean it." "I know," she said softly, "and that's the problem. You think this is a rescue. It's not." He didn't back down. "You think I'm here to save you?" "I think you're used to being the man who fixes things," she said. "But this isn't a leak you can buy off or a story you can bury. This is a network, built to destroy." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Then we build one of our own." That stopped her. "What do you mean?" "A counter network," he said. "Not bots, real voices, real information. We can feed the right people the truth, quietly." Her brow furrowed. "You have someone in mind?" He nodded. "There's a journalist, Dana Voss. She's the only one who ever dared to question Vivian Cross's charity foundation audits. She got buried for it, but she's still publishing under her own name. If anyone can trace the money trail behind those fake bonds, it's her." Mara folded her arms, weighing his words. "And what's your plan? Email her a fairy tale about the poor heiress and the misunderstood tycoon?" Ethan smirked faintly. "No. We give her proof." She looked skeptical. "You don't have it." "Not yet," he said, "but you do." Her silence was answer enough. He took another step closer, lowering his voice. "The ledger you showed me, the one with the initials VC, I can have my lab authenticate the ink and date of the signature. If the timestamp doesn't match the bond's registration file, we'll have physical evidence that the guarantee was forged." Mara hesitated. "It's not that simple. My father's pen, the one used for his signatures, was seized when the company collapsed. Everything was. I only have one other pen that matches the make and ink batch." "Then that's where we start." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, but if you do this, you follow my rules." "Your rules," her gaze hardened. "No leaks, no investors, no corporate contacts. We use only what we can trace and verify ourselves. One mistake, and they'll bury us before we even publish a word." He held her stare. "Agreed." Mara exhaled slowly and crossed to the desk. She opened a slim metal case and drew out the pen. The pen, gleaming with age and care. The inscription on its barrel read, R. Vale & Co. Ethan reached out, but she pulled it back slightly. "This belonged to my father," she said. "He believed that signing your name was the same as giving your word. That's why it destroyed him when his name was forged." Her voice cracked just slightly. "I used to think I could smell the ink on his study desk. Iron gall and cedar. I can still tell if a document carries that blend." Ethan nodded, his expression gentler now. "Then we'll use that. I'll have it scanned for trace composition. If the ink on the ledger matches, we'll prove the forgery came from someone else's hand." Mara looked down at the pen, the weight of it heavy in her palm. "You don't understand, Ethan. If this is what I think it is, if Vivian and Charles were involved, it's not just a scandal, it's the foundation of half the projects along the East Coast." He met her eyes. "Then it's time someone questioned the foundation." She almost smiled, a bitter curve of lips. "You sound like my father. I'll take that as a compliment." He glanced at her computer screen, still glowing with hateful headlines. They think they can drown you out with noise. Let's give them something they can't mute. Proof? She asked. Truth, he said. It makes better noise. That night, they moved to Ethan's private office, a high-ceiling space overlooking the city, walls lined with books and cold glass. The storm outside blurred the skyline into streaks of silver. Mara sat up at the long table, spreading documents across the surface. Scanned invoices, tax returns, blueprints, and the original ledger. Ethan pulled a whiteboard from the wall, marking connections with red lines. Vivian Cross, Charles Montrose, Raphael Vale, the forged bond. The network began to take shape, a lattice of motives and money. Ethan stepped back, eyes scanning the web of names. It's all connected through shell charities and legal subsidiaries, each one feeding the next. It's a machine built to recycle corruption. Mara nodded. And my father was the part that jammed the gears. She took out her phone, typing a secure message. Drafting the file for Dana Voss. She'll receive an anonymous drop with preliminary evidence. Nothing that can trace back to us yet. Ethan leaned over her shoulder. Good. Once the ink report comes back, she'll have enough to go public. Mara paused. And if she doesn't? If they silence her, too? Then we release it ourselves, he said. On every channel that ever tried to bury you. For the first time, she looked at him with something that almost resembled trust. You really don't scare easily, do you? He smiled faintly. I've been called worse. The clock ticked past midnight. The storm began to ease, leaving streaks of rain trailing down the glass. The desk lamp cast a warm pool of light over the documents, over the pen, the ledger, and the faint ink glimmer that tied the past to the present. Mara stood in silence, studying the map of strings on the wall, the way every thread pointed back to two names written side by side, VC and CM. Vivian and Charles, she murmured. The signature and the seal. Ethan looked up from his notes. What did you say? The guarantee that ruined my father. It needed two things, the forged signature and a legal certification to make it valid. Vivian Cross forged it. Charles Montrose validated it. Husband and wife, perfect symmetry. Ethan's jaw clenched. Then let's break the symmetry. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper, sealed with wax and embossed in gold. Harrington Club, private dinner by invitation only. Mara read it twice, her reflection glinting in the window of Ethan's office. He took one look at the letter and muttered, "It's a trap." "Of course it is," she said calmly, slipping it back into its envelope. "That's why I'm going." Mara, she cut him off with a quiet smile. If Vivian Cross wants to see me, it means she's nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. Ethan leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You don't have to walk into her den to prove a point. This isn't about proving a point, she said. It's about finishing what my father started. He stared at her for a long moment, realizing there was no changing her mind. Then you're not going alone, he said finally. Noah will be inside, quietly. That night, the Harrington Club gleamed like a cathedral of old money. Walnut-paneled walls, chandeliers dripping crystal, the faint scent of cigar smoke lingering in the air. Vivian Cross was already there, radiant in an emerald gown, her poise sharpened to a blade. Beside her, Charles Montrose looked older than his tailored suit, eyes restless, fingers twitching against his glass. When Mara entered, the room shifted. Cameras weren't allowed, but every glance felt like a lens. "Miss Vale," Vivian said with a voice dipped in honey and venom. "So glad you accepted. I was beginning to think you'd lost your appetite for society." Mara smiled faintly. "On the contrary, I've been starving for a decent conversation." Vivian's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Then let's eat." The dinner began like a performance. Champagne poured, polished laughter echoing across the long mahogany table. But beneath the polite chatter, tension pulsed like an undercurrent. Charles barely spoke. He pushed food around his plate, avoiding both women's eyes. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Vivian, perhaps we should—" Vivian's voice cut like glass. "Not now, Charles." Mara set down her fork. "Actually, I think now is perfect." Vivian turned, her smile stiff. "Excuse me?" Mara's tone was measured, calm. "Because I believe your husband has something he wants to share." A silence fell. Charles' gaze flickered from Mara to Vivian. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket and produced a small voice recorder. Ethan, waiting at the bar with a direct view of the dining room, straightened instantly. Noah, disguised as a waiter, froze near the service door. Charles pressed play. The sound that filled the room was unmistakable, Vivian's voice crisp, commanding. Recreate the guarantee file. Use Vale's name, but clean the ledger. I want every number aligned. Make it look legitimate. Then another voice, nervous, male. That's falsification, Mrs. Cross. It's illegal. Vivian's tone turned icy. You'll be well compensated for your loyalty, or unemployed for your conscience. Choose carefully. The recording ended. For a second, no one breathed. Vivian's lips trembled into a laugh. You expect anyone to believe this? A cheap recording? My husband has always had imaginative tendencies. Charles stood, voice shaking but steady. You think I didn't know? I signed those certifications because you told me it was harmless. But I kept everything. The drafts, the memos, the transactions. I'm done being your shield, Vivian. Mara rose to her feet. You're not the only one with evidence. From her bag, she pulled out a bound folder. This is the original ledger, my father's. She flipped it open, revealing neatly preserved pages. Your initials, Mrs. Cross, appear next to every unauthorized transfer. And here, she placed Ethan's authenticated lab report beside it. The ink composition matches my father's pen, but the timestamp doesn't. The dates prove the ledger was altered after his death. Vivian's mask slipped. For the first time, real panic flickered behind her composure. And it doesn't end there, Mara continued. The funds from those forged bonds were routed through Adrian Moreau's Coastal Infrastructure Trust, a perfect shell for laundering millions under environmental development grants. A murmur rippled through the small circle of elite guests. Someone stood near the doorway. Dana Voss, the investigative journalist, phone in hand, camera light faintly blinking. Vivian turned pale. You can't publish that. It's defamation. Dana's voice cut across the room. It's evidence. And then came the unmistakable sound of a door opening sharply, followed by the echo of formal footsteps. Two men in dark suits entered, followed by a woman with a badge pinned to her lapel. Vivian Cross, she announced. You are under arrest for financial fraud, falsification of federal contracts, and obstruction of justice. Vivian stood frozen, color draining from her face. You can't... I'm on the board of... The agent's voice was firm. You can explain that to the Attorney General. Behind them, another pair of officers approached Adrian Moreau, who had been standing silently in the big wine glass halfway to his lips. Adrian Moreau, one said. You are being detained for questioning under the authority of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Adrian's suave demeanor cracked for the first time. This is absurd. Ethan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. So, was building an empire out of someone else's ruin. As the cuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists, cameras flashed from the hallway, journalists flooding in now that the embargo had lifted. The polished oak walls reflected the chaos in perfect symmetry. Flashbulbs, gasps, the glint of metal. Vivian's eyes darted to Mara as she was led toward the door. You think this ends with me? She hissed. You don't know what you've started. Mara's reply was quiet but sharp as glass. No, you don't know what you ended. Vivian was escorted out, her emerald dress trailing like a fallen banner. Charles sank back into his chair, his hands trembling. I never meant... Mara stopped him gently. You just didn't stop her. But you can still make it right. Give your testimony. He nodded slowly, guilt heavy in his eyes. Outside, the storm had cleared. Flashlights from the press scattered across the street as officers guided Vivian and Adrian into waiting cars. Ethan turned to Mara, his voice low. You did it. She looked at the empty chair where Vivian had sat moments before, the untouched wine still trembling in its glass. No, she said softly. Truth did. For the first time in years, her father's name was clean, and the world that had tried to erase her was finally listening. By morning, Boston was awake to chaos. Every screen, every paper, every headline pulsed with the same name, Vivian Cross, once the untouchable symbol of modern philanthropy, now the face of calculated fraud. The footage replayed on loop, her arrest at the Harrington Club, the flashbulbs, the silver cuffs glinting beneath the chandelier. The mighty had fallen, and the city couldn't look away. But in another part of town, far from the frenzy, Mara Vale stood on the balcony of Ethan's office, watching the gray dawn bleed across the river. Justice, she had thought, would sound like triumph. Instead, it sounded like silence. She had fought for this moment for years, the truth exposed, her father's name cleared, the web of deceit unraveling. Yet now, standing in the calm after the storm, she felt hollow. The door opened behind her. Ethan stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You haven't slept," he said softly. She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. "Neither have you." He smiled faintly. "We're even then." They stood in silence for a while, the city stretching before them like a map of second chances. "Charles Montrose signed a cooperation deal this morning," Ethan said finally. "He's turning over every document and testifying before the SEC. It's going to end quickly." Mara nodded, her gaze fixed on the water. "He should. He lived with a lie long enough." Ethan hesitated, then added, "And Vivian?" "Held without bail," she said. Dana confirmed the prosecutors are freezing all her assets. He exhaled slowly. "It's over." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "For her, not for me." "What do you mean?" "I spent half my life chasing ghosts, Ethan. Now that I've caught them, I don't know what to do with my hands." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe it's time you build something new." She gave a tired smile. "You sound like you have a pitch." He did. That afternoon, he invited her into the conference room, but this time, the screens weren't filled with market charts or forecasts. A single slide glowed on the wall, Vail Whitaker Strategies. Below the title, Ethical Investments for Sustainable Communities. She arched an eyebrow. "You're naming it after me?" "After both of us," he said. "It's a fund focused on affordable housing, community health care, and local tech innovation. You and I know how easily power can twist impact. I want to prove that wealth can serve integrity." Mara folded her arms, studying the slide. "And what do you get out of this?" He smiled. "A chance to do something right, for once." She was quiet for a long moment. "You want me to partner?" "I want you to lead," he said. "The world doesn't need another billionaire with good intentions. It needs someone who has lived through what bad ones can do." Mara's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, not quite a refusal. "You realize if I do this, it won't be a glossy PR stunt. No charity galas, no staged photo ops." "I wouldn't expect less," he said. "And I'm not putting your name on top just to polish your reputation." Ethan chuckled. "I don't need it polished. I need it repurposed." She tilted her head. "Then here are my conditions." He gestured for her to go on. "First," she said, "our profits won't be measured in stock performance. We'll attach every project to social impact KPIs, tangible results, number of homes built, patients treated, local jobs created." He nodded. "Done." "Second," she continued, "full transparency, no offshore accounts, no silent partners. If a single deal compromises ethics, it dies on the table." Ethan didn't blink. "Agreed." She looked at him, searching for the catch. "And third, this isn't about redemption for either of us. If we do this, we do it because people deserve better systems, not better saviors." Ethan's voice softened. "That's exactly why I came to you." She studied him, the sharp edge of her skepticism softening into something almost fragile. "Then we have a deal." He extended his hand, and she took it, firm, steady, without ceremony. For the first time in months, her grip didn't carry the weight of vengeance. It carried purpose. 2 weeks later, the new office took shape on the top floor of a converted warehouse by the Charles River. Minimalist glass, open light, whiteboards covered in diagrams and values. A plaque on the wall read, "Vail Whitaker Strategies, Ethics Before Empire." Mara walked the space in quiet satisfaction. Boxes still lined the floor, the scent of fresh paint mixing with coffee. Noah was already at his desk, sleeves rolled up, a stack of compliance reports in front of him. "Never thought I'd see you reading legal policy for fun," Mara teased. He grinned. "I'm not here for fun. I'm here to make sure we never end up on the wrong side of an audit." "You're our new chief compliance officer," Ethan said from across the room. "Congratulations, by the way." Noah smirked. "Thanks. I only took the job because I don't trust you two not to accidentally start a moral revolution." Mara laughed, the first genuine laugh Ethan had heard from her since the night of the arrests. "You'll fit right in," she said. On one wall, a digital dashboard displayed live data, housing units under construction, micro-clinic partnerships, environmental restoration projects. Every figure came with two metrics: financial yield and community impact. Ethan watched her as she studied the board, the reflection of the river glimmering across the glass walls. "You built this," he said softly. She turned to him. "No, we built this." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the silence like distant applause. Then Mara looked at the horizon, her tone calm but resolute. "You know what my father used to say?" Ethan shook his head. "That profit isn't evil, it's just easily persuaded." He smiled. "Then let's persuade it in the right direction." She nodded slowly, her eyes shining faintly. "For once, I think we will." The camera of life, if one existed, would have pulled back then. Two people standing before a new skyline, a company built not from ambition or revenge, but from the fragile, stubborn hope that integrity could outlive power. The gala was supposed to mark a new beginning, an evening for investors, journalists, and reformers to celebrate the rise of Vail Whitaker Strategies, the company that had turned scandal into ethics. Mara arrived in a navy dress, poised yet understated, her badge clipped beside the logo she had fought to build. For once, she allowed herself to breathe. But peace, she was learning, rarely lasted long in Boston. Across the ballroom, laughter swelled, cameras flashed, and there, by the bar, stood a face she never thought she'd see again. Adrien Moreau. He was freshly pressed, smug as ever, the faintest scar of arrogance at the corner of his mouth. His bail had been posted by an undisclosed foreign consortium, and judging by the champagne in his hand, he wasn't hiding. Their eyes met through the crowd. "Mara Vail," he said smoothly when he reached her, his accent curling like smoke. "Or do I call you Whitaker now?" Her tone stayed calm. "Vail is enough. The second name is a partnership, not ownership." Adrian smiled. "Touché, still speaking in headlines." "I've had practice," she replied. "The difference is now I control the narrative." He laughed lightly. "And yet, here I am, standing in your story again." Before she could answer, Ethan appeared beside her, expression cold. "You have 5 seconds to walk away." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Ah, the guardian angel himself." He turned slightly toward Mara. "Does he always speak for you, or only when he's jealous?" The room seemed to tilt with tension. "Adrian," Mara said evenly, "you're under active investigation. You shouldn't be here." "Oh, I have every right to celebrate redemption stories," he said with mock cheer. "After all, you've made such a profitable business out of yours." Ethan stepped forward, jaw tight. "Leave." Adrian's eyes glinted. "Careful, Mr. Whitaker. Not every cage has bars. Some are made of ambition." Then he set down his glass and walked away, the echo of his shoes fading into applause for someone else's speech. Mara turned to Ethan. "You didn't have to." "He provoked you," Ethan snapped. "No," she said quietly. "He provoked you." He blinked. "I was protecting you." "From what? Words?" "From men like him." She took a slow breath. "You still don't understand. I've already survived men like him." His voice dropped, lower, rougher. "And I won't let them touch you again." "Then you'll suffocate me instead," she said. The words hung between them, heavier than the chandelier light. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mara turned away, leaving him standing amid the glittering noise of the ballroom. Hours later, the celebration was over. The parking lot outside glowed under sodium lights, nearly empty except for a few cars. Mara walked toward hers, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. The night air was cool, almost still, until she saw it. Her car's windshield was slashed with a single word, carved deep and jagged across the glass. "Beware." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to silence. Then instinct returned. She took out her phone, snapped a photo, and sent it directly to Ethan. He called within seconds. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." But she had already unlocked the car and sat inside, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. When Ethan arrived 10 minutes later, he found her calm again, composed but pale. "Why didn't you wait for security?" he demanded. "Because I'm tired of being hunted," she said softly, "and I refuse to be afraid in my own city." He crouched beside the car, studying the carved word under his flashlight. It's deliberate, calculated, not random vandalism. Back in his office that night, he launched a private investigation. He brought in his cybersecurity team, tracing digital footprints from recent hate emails sent to the company's inbox. Most were bots, automated noise from anonymous servers. But one stood out, an encrypted message attached with falsified documents claiming Vail Whitaker Strategies had diverted grant funds into private accounts. It was an obvious forgery, but the precision of it, the insider knowledge, made Ethan's stomach twist. He ordered a forensic trace. The results came back at dawn. The IP trail led to a single location, a townhouse registered to Gordon Pierce, a former accountant in Vivian Cross's inner circle. He was part of her charity laundering operation, Noah reported. He must have stayed quiet during the arrests, waiting for a payday. Looks like he's trying to finish what she started. Ethan's jaw set. Get the authorities involved. Mara, who had been listening from the corner, shook her head. No, not yet. He turned sharply. Mara, if we call the police now, the story becomes about us again. About the scandal, the threats, the victimhood. I won't let them hijack our work like that. He stared at her. You'd rather let them keep coming? Her voice was steady, unflinching. I'd rather face them than run from them. She stepped closer, her eyes hard with resolve. I lost everything once. Reputation, family, safety. And I survived. So, if someone thinks they can break me again, they'll have to learn I'm not the same woman anymore. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he exhaled, the fight draining from his shoulders. You're impossible, he murmured. I prefer resilient. He almost smiled. Fine, but I'm not standing back this time. We'll fight on your terms. Together. Together, she repeated softly. The word tasting foreign but solid. A week later, the threats stopped. The vandal, identified and detained, confessed under pressure. The last remnant of Vivian's crumbling empire. The digital attacks vanished as suddenly as they had begun. When Mara arrived at the office the following Monday, she found Ethan waiting by the glass wall overlooking the river. Any more threats? He asked. None, she said. Maybe they realized fear doesn't work anymore. He nodded. Or maybe you scared them more than they scared you. She smirked faintly. I doubt that. He turned to face her fully. You were right, you know. About what? About control, he said. I thought protecting you meant guarding you, but it just meant not trusting you to fight your own battles. Her tone softened. You learned fast. He smiled. You taught fast. And they stood there, side by side, the river glinting below them. Outside, Boston moved on. The city that had watched them fall and rebuild, that had witnessed vengeance turn into something quieter, steadier, and perhaps stronger. For the first time in a long while, Mara didn't feel like a target or a survivor. She felt like herself, sharp, scarred, and utterly alive. The days after the threats felt strangely quiet. The crisis had passed, but the exhaustion it left behind lingered like invisible smoke. Ethan buried himself in work, refusing to slow down even as the color drained from his face. At first, Mara assumed it was stress, but by the fourth night, when he missed a meeting without a word, she grew uneasy. She found him at the office, slumped on the couch, his laptop still open, a half-finished email glowing on the screen. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. Ethan, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Hey, he murmured hoarsely. Did we finish the... You're burning up, she said, pressing her hand to his forehead. When was the last time you slept? He smiled weakly. Remind me what day it is? That's not funny. It wasn't a joke. Mara sighed, frustration and worry tangling inside her. She helped him to his feet and guided him toward the elevator despite his protests. I can walk, he muttered. Good, she said. Then walk faster. At his apartment, she found the medicine cabinet nearly empty. A single bottle of aspirin, 2 mugs stained with coffee, and takeout boxes piled like architectural models of burnout. She settled him onto the couch, fetched a damp towel, and placed it on his forehead. You don't have to play nurse, he said faintly. Maybe I'm not doing it for you, she replied. Maybe I'm doing it because I can't stand watching people destroy themselves. He managed a weak smile. You're terrible at pretending you don't care. Sleep, she said firmly. And for once, he obeyed. The night stretched long and quiet. Mara worked at the kitchen table, reviewing project notes under the warm hum of the lamp, pausing now and then to check on him. Each time she replaced the cool towel, she noticed his features softening, the constant tension gone, replaced by something peaceful, vulnerable. At dawn, she made tea and leaned back against the counter, exhaustion tugging at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting an enemy. She was simply caring. When Ethan woke, the light was golden, spilling across the room like forgiveness. He blinked, disoriented. "You stayed?" Mara looked up from her cup. "You needed someone to make sure you didn't answer work emails in your sleep." He laughed weakly. "So, you took shifts between nurse and warden?" "Something like that." He tried to sit up, wincing. "You didn't have to," she interrupted softly. "I wanted to." Silence lingered between them, not heavy, but tender, tentative. Then he said it, simply, without build-up or ceremony. "I love you." Mara froze. The words were quiet, almost careless, but they landed with the weight of truth. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He just watched her, steady, waiting. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but sure. "I know," he smiled. And, she said, setting down her cup, "I love you too." The relief that crossed his face was almost boyish. He laughed once, then pulled her gently into his arms. For the first time, neither of them was guarding anything. 2 weeks later, when he had recovered, Ethan insisted on driving her somewhere. No work, no press, no plans. They left the city before dawn. The sky over Rhode Island was watercolor blue when they reached Newport. Mara stepped out of the car, the ocean wind catching her hair, the air tasting faintly of salt and pine. Ahead of them stood a small wooden house perched on the dunes. Weathered, quiet, alive with the sound of gulls. "What is this place?" she asked. Ethan's gaze softened. "My father bought it years ago. He dreamed of restoring it but never got the chance. I thought maybe we could finish it together." She smiled, touched. "You're giving me your father's dream?" He shook his head. "I'm asking you to help me build a new one." They walked toward the porch. The boards creaked under their steps, the sea wind threading through the silence between them. Inside, the rooms were bare. Sunlight spilling through cracked shutters, dust motes dancing like memories. Ethan turned to her, something uncertain flickering in his eyes. "I wanted to bring you here because everything in my life has been rebuilt, except me. And somehow, you made me want to start." Mara's throat tightened. You already did." He smiled faintly. "Not alone." From his pocket, he pulled out a silver chain. Hanging from it was something she hadn't expected. The locket she had carried for years, the small silver piece that once held her father's photograph. Her breath caught. "You found it." "You left it at my apartment the night I was sick," he said. "So, I added something." He held it up, and she saw it. A simple, unadorned ring threaded beside the locket. Not a diamond, not gold, just polished steel etched with 2 initials, E and M. "No grand gestures," he said. "No vows in front of cameras. Just this, your lock and my promise." She smiled through the sting of tears. "And what exactly are you promising?" He took her hand and placed the chain into her palm. "That you'll never have to fight alone again, and that from now on, you have the key to open any door, including mine." The wind lifted her red scarf, letting it flutter like a ribbon of memory. She looked down at the ring and the locket, their metal gleaming softly in the late afternoon sun. Then she looked at him and nodded. "Yes." Ethan exhaled, laughing quietly. "That's it? No long speeches?" Mara smiled. "I've had enough words for a lifetime." He stepped closer, his forehead resting against hers. "Then we'll build the rest in silence." Outside, waves crashed softly against the shore, and gulls circled overhead. The house creaked, the air smelled of salt and cedar, and 2 people who had spent years fighting ghosts finally let the wind carry the weight away. The garden by the sea glowed in soft gold, white chairs curved in perfect symmetry beneath flowering arches, the ocean behind them shimmering like a living witness. It wasn't a grand wedding, no press, no opulence, just warmth. Close friends, colleagues, a handful of people who had survived the same storms. Noah stood at the altar, officiating with a grin far too wide for his tailored suit. "Today," he began, "we're not just signing contracts or joining companies. We're building the most unpredictable merger in history. 2 hearts with entirely different risk profiles. Laughter rippled through the guests. Mara looked radiant in simplicity. A linen gown that moved with the wind, her red scarf tied gently around her wrist like a thread of history she refused to cut. Ethan, in a pale gray suit, couldn't stop smiling long enough to breathe. When it came time for vows, Mara spoke first. Her voice was calm, but every word struck with purpose. I used to think justice meant winning. Then I thought it meant survival. But now I know. It means building something that lasts. She turned to him, eyes bright. So, my vow isn't about love, Ethan. It's about work. The kind that changes the world one person at a time. I vow that our prophets will always have a conscience, and that our love will never be afraid of accountability. The wind carried her words out to sea. Ethan took her hands. His tone softened. You taught me that victory without empathy is just another kind of failure. So, I vow to build with you, to measure success not by what we earn, but by what we enable. They smiled through tears, and when Noah finally declared, "You may now kiss your partner in ethics and life," the entire garden burst into applause. The kiss was simple, quiet, honest, like two survivors promising not just to heal, but to create. A week later, the world began to take notice. On a breezy spring morning, news drones hovered above the riverfront as Vail Whitaker Strategies broke ground on their first major development, the Harbor Light Residences, affordable housing powered by renewable energy, funded by ethical investments. Reporters called it a hybrid model, a marriage of capitalism and compassion, the first proof that moral math can add up. Mara stood on site in a hard hat and white shirt rolled at the sleeves, surrounded by builders and local residents. When the cameras asked for a quote, she said simply, "We're not giving charity, we're building dignity." Behind her, a banner fluttered, "Home begins with integrity." That afternoon, Ethan joined her at the edge of the site. The sound of drills and laughter echoed across the open lot. He handed her a small metal box. "Time capsule," he said, "for the foundation." Inside were 3 items: a printed copy of their first project plan, the photo of her father, Raphael Valle, smiling with dusty hands, and the antique pen. They had used to sign the company charter. Mara touched the pen reverently. "He'd like this. He'd be proud," Ethan said. "You turned his name into a promise." They placed the box into the cornerstone together. Months passed. The buildings rose like a new skyline, pale brick and glass, balconies filled with small plants and larger dreams. In quiet moments, Mara found herself back at the Newport house. The renovations were nearly done, the porch freshly painted, the little library already filled with books about ethics, architecture, and hope. It was there, one quiet morning, that Ethan found her standing barefoot in the kitchen, holding an envelope from the doctor. He froze when he saw her face, a rare, radiant stillness. "Mara?" She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "We're having twins." For a second, he didn't move. Then he laughed, loud, disbelieving, overjoyed. "Twins?" "2 heartbeats," she said softly, placing his hand over hers. Ethan's voice broke with emotion. "I can't believe it." "You'd better," she teased. "You're already outnumbered." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I'll take the odds." That evening, the sky blushed over the ocean. Ethan sat on the porch, a mug of tea in his hand, speaking softly to the quiet air, or perhaps to the 2 lives still forming within it. "Hey there, you 2, he said with a grin. "Your mom says you will probably be stubborn like her. She's right. But don't worry. She'll teach you how to use that stubbornness for good." He looked out at the waves. "This house is for you. We're going to build a little library here. Shelves low enough for small hands, windows that open wide. And outside." He paused, glancing at the silver wind chime hanging from the porch beam. Dozens of tiny silver locks shimmered in the sea breeze, each one chiming softly. "There'll be more of those," he said. "Each one a reminder that every lock can open with the right key." Mara stepped into the doorway, watching him with a smile. "Talking to our future employees again?" He laughed. "Just introducing them to their future office." She walked over, resting a hand on his shoulder. "They'll grow up thinking justice is a family business." He looked up at her. "Isn't it?" Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the last light of day spilled over the water. "Maybe that's what justice really is. Not revenge, not punishment." "What then?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Making sure someone after you has a place to call home." The words lingered in the air, soft as the waves, steady as truth. Ethan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers as the ocean whispered below. Behind them, through the open window, the faint hum of construction carried from the city. Hammers, laughter, progress, the sound of people building.